Hi guys, we've done it. Reviewed as many games in the Games Workshop catalogue as possible, and of course now we have to give you a rundown on the worst to the best. We did our best to be fair with it, but honestly, some of the positions may seem a little odd, but remember, this is just our opinion as GW fanboys, so we don't take it personally if you disagree, honestly. Before we get started, we'd like to mention some of the GW games that won't feature in this list. Space Hulk Vengeance of the Blood Angels was an elusive title that we couldn't get working. I recall playing it in 1996 or so, and it was a Doom clone. Nokia released a handheld version of their stupid phone called Glory and Death. It seems that this is impossible to come across emulators, and it would be a step too far to spend hundreds of pounds on what is likely to be a forgettable game. Fire Warrior is a PS2 and a PC port, and even though I own a copy, it just isn't playing ball. Even in 2001, I bought a copy for my PC and I just wanted to crash over and over again. This game and I were never meant to be. Storm of Vengeance? This is an oddity as it's a pretty new game, but it looks like it's been pulled from nearly every digital store going. God knows why, and I guarantee you it wouldn't have come last in this list. Warhammer 40,000 Inquisitor Martyr missed the list by simply being too new and we had a cut-off point. Lastly, some versions of games, such as Chaos League, the Blood Bowl clone, will not feature as it starts getting ambiguous as to what's a GW game or not. Further to that, some mobile ports that are identical to the desktop version are all in one position, as well as sequels that are too similar to the original game. It's not worth separating them into their own spots or the list would have been way longer. Anyway, let's get started on
51.
Battle for Atluma, awful PS game with illegible text based on a card system that wasn't very popular and was not intuitive at all. There are updated versions of this that look like they fixed it for the most part, but it's far too little too late.
50.
Skaven Doom Wheels are fun, right?
Wrong.
Doom Wheels are meant to be a terrifying creation of doom and terror. Even Skaven as a race are meant to be unpleasant and unsettling. So why oh why make a stupid Excite Bike style racing game? Honestly, there's nothing left to say about how this game flared my nostrils while playing it.
49.
Blood Bowl Crunch exists as a board game, but it doesn't matter because Blood Bowl is so much better. Crunch wasn't a popular board game in the 90s, and re-releasing it as a video game is fitting. It has the same fate.
48.
Arcane Magic looks pretty and certainly had an angle not seen before in video games. Having the wizards show their sheer power was an interesting concept, but this game just flat out fails to be anything other than a shallow tactical roleplay adventure. Lacking story, tactical depth and any real gameplay, this is one to miss.
47.
It's cruel to think, in 1995, there should have been a very capable Blood Bowl game, but what they released was a bit of a mess. It should have been more intuitive on the button icons, and it is a punishing game for its own UI errors. All the components were there to make a great game, but it just fell over itself and never really unraveled.
46.
Battle of Talarn is so mediocre, it's dull, predictable and boring. Strategy games lend themselves really well to the 40k universe generally, but this is proof that developers need ideas and creativity to get the most from it.
45.
Legacy of Dorn, Herald of Oblivion is a really interesting concept, done to a minimum in my opinion. The choose your own adventure idea has been explored much better in recent video games. So the only thing that this has is the allure of a book series that they hope fans want. Honestly, if there was a choose your own adventure 40k series, I'd be all over it, but not in the digital form, thanks.
44.
Oh, aren't snotlings cute? Well, sort of I guess. Angry Birds meets Warhammer shouldn't exist, but it does. Snotling Fling works, sort of too. It's a frustrating game more than an average one. After a couple of levels, it loses its charms, but it also feels so bizarre to even exist.
43.
Carnage is a capable shooter that kids may be able to get behind. That seemingly invincible Space Marine annihilating everything ever. Carnage is that game that you play for 5 minutes and put it down. Maybe to repeat that process every 4 months. It's not a very rewarding game.
42.
Ah, Epic, how you let me down. Epic Space Marine is where it all began with me, and sadly this game didn't translate well from the tabletop. It tried in vain to be a massive battles type game, but falls hard on the first hurdle as you watch your troops very slowly advance and very quickly drop to enemy attacks. Thinking about it, that's exactly what happens on the tabletop.
41.
I feel like I missed something here. Walk forward and you have your squad insta-dead from a turret. Slowest squad movement and a horrid UI pushes this game right down the list. I love turn-based games, but this one just wants to show off its swanky graphics instead, and the graphics aren't even that good.
40.
Get ready for a heart attack! I laugh every time I think of this game, it's just so jumpy. Horror games are not my thing admittedly, but come on, I want a chance please. Space Hulk was so brave to try some really extraordinary ideas, and it's a shame they didn't work better. It really captured the feeling of dread that you should have going aboard an abandoned ship full of aliens.
39.
Kill Team is a game that almost worked, if only it picked more suitable terrain, more care on the camera angles, and a lot more attention to objectives in the game. God of War, for example, doesn't have you repeat the same actions over and over in the intro missions, so why in an action game would you expect this to happen? Kill Team deserves better, honestly. It's one of the few GW multiplayers, but honestly, who cares?
38.
The face to the truth. I have looked on the terrors of the universe.
Ah, Mark Strong, the man that is the voice of the Space Marines. Whatever you do, GW, keep paying him. Eisenhorn Xenos is a bit of an anomaly of a game in the library, almost like a film noir detective series set in space. The soundtrack's outstanding and the mood setting is right, but otherwise it plays sort of like a bad PSP game. In my opinion, it's pretty bad because it's portable. It should have stuck with one system and run with it. Screw sales when you can make a good game.
It's Gregor Eisenhorn, and these
37.
Rights of War is almost my favourite game ever, but it's definitely not. Rights of War borrows the Fantasy General system really nicely, and the upgrade system is good, but it's just, well, the game sort of repeats itself in a pretty boring way. It was awesome being the Eldar for a change. Rights of War is that predictable wargame that people think of when they think of a hex game in the 90s.
36.
Ah, Hero Quest, why are you not higher on this list? In terms of board games, you're so near the top, so what went wrong?
Hero Quest is the best game ever made, and anyone who says otherwise is wrong.
The video game is just pretty dull. It's a direct translation of the board game, in which, at least in the board game, you're rolling physical dice, which is really exciting. Hero Quest is a flawed but forgivable experience due to its age. If anything, it's commendable that Hero Quest has beaten a lot of the newer, more polished games to this position. Well done, Hero Quest. You won't be forgotten.
35.
Another direct translation of a card game from the 90s. This time with interesting results. The studio did a really interesting job of animating your play area. Chainsaw Warrior does a good job of keeping you invested in the lore and story even though you're making few choices. The game is the ultimate self-punishment and one of the earliest soloable games I can recall.
34.
Who wants to show off the graphics on their phone? Not many people I know of actually, but if you did, you'd probably show this off to your nan and she'd only pretend to care. Freeblade is really interesting that it's taken knights and a rail shooter to make the most of a coherent game. I say mostly because your fingers are really not that accurate. With all this headgear and 3D technology about, I wonder if it could have been put to better use for Freeblade. Ah well, it's done now. Mediocrity for the win then.
33.
Hero Quest 2 did what everyone wanted it to do, be miles away from the first, assign movement points, and generally keep in bits that people liked. This is all well and good, but it also moves it away from Hero Quest and into that generic dungeon crawler. It's safe to say it's a much better and different game to the first, but releasing it on the Amiga only was a nail in the coffin.
Because the only true way to expand Hero Quest is with more Hero Quest.
32.
Hands up everyone who loves Space Crusade. Everyone, great. Let's play a game then. After a game of Space Crusade, hands up who loves Space Crusade. Oh, no one. Space Crusade is that game that certainly lives in our minds more than it does in reality. I can talk. I've recently had this experience thrust upon me and I hated it. I also loved it too. The video game, direct translation of the board game, so you look out for it to remind yourself of why it's the worst and it's the best.
31.
Mordheim City of the Damned is probably the first real disappointment on this list.
Sorry, Hero Quest.
The promo material looked immense. It seemed this was going to be the big game to relaunch the career of all those gangs in the old world. Yet, on release, it was more mediocre than anything. Getting deeper into it, it only gets frustrating trying to find objects seemingly on top of you or scrolling through endless ways to hit your enemy. In all this heap of a game, there's something there, and I'm sure if you put 30 hours a week in, it would be a solid experience. But most people have better things to do.
30.
Battlefleet Gothic Leviathan is a mobile port of its big brother, and it is complex. I applaud the guys that made this, as it genuinely seems deep, tactical, and perhaps one of the best mobile games out there. But I have an issue with it being on my phone. I can't read small text and I have big clumsy fingers. There isn't a right answer here, and I really appreciate that Leviathan is just on the wrong device for me. Decent sized tablet and you're onto a winner, I'm sure.
29.
Battlefield meets 40k. It's a neat idea and executed pretty well. That is, if you're not really bored of Capture the Flag. I'll also point out, die-hard first-person shooter fans will have a lot to grumble about because it's not nearly as polished as other FPS out there. Relying on the fans of 40k in this case isn't really enough to qualify a good game when this genre is already swamped with absolute precision and perhaps the most hardcore gamers out there. Mark of Chaos promised so much and only half delivered. On the face of it, you'd swear it was a total war game, but under its hood it's far less impressive. Balance issues, launch promises, daft AI, and a faltering UI made Mark of Chaos looking less impressive than it really was. All the ingredients were ready to make a decent Warhammer game here, but seemingly too much ambition and not enough attention to detail smothered the game.
37.
Warhammer Online was GW's biggest gamble for some time. Would it work? And could they compete with World of Warcraft, a game that already borrows several resemblances to the old world? Short answer is no, it couldn't. The other short answer is it could have if GW had kept feeding the developers. The plan was in place, how to win over the internet, but it was risky and costly. Warhammer Online didn't do anything new, and its closure certainly had repercussions still heard and felt today.
26.
Another direct translation of a board game. Did we need it? Do we need it? No. But it's a solo experience that some crave. Getting your mates around for a long game of Talisman can be a long and tired experience. So this is a decent venture into getting your fix anytime you desire.
25.
Mordheim Warbands plays much better than the desktop version, primarily by cutting down on the stupid options and focusing play a little more linear, almost going back to tactical RPG with squares mapped out. Warbands is a nice and easy to play game for your mobile device. Free to play model here isn't too invasive either, and there is a growing community that wants to see the game succeed. The team involved do a great job actively listening to feedback and regularly updating the content.
24.
Dawn of War 3 probably deserves to be higher in this list, but it also doesn't do enough to be a standout game. In fact, I'd say it's Dawn of War 2's fault for trying a new style that determines the third entry also needs to be its own creation. 3 is guilty of over-promising, and on the face of it, it looks like it wanted all the players from the 2 previous editions to return. But lackluster sales saw them quickly pull the plug, only to annoy those that had already invested. I tell you, sometimes these guys are their own worst enemies.
Maybe 3.
I had really hoped Corsair was going to be immense in every regard, but instead it's a little stilted in most areas. Trying to be a real-time strategy FPS land and sea combat system was grossly underestimated here. What were they thinking? It should have been a more concrete game in one area, but instead has you doing everything. It's impressive to think about, but underwhelming to witness. I'd love to see a return to MANOWAR, but next time focus on one thing and do that really well.
22.
Captain Loken, you landed on the...
Legions kind of gets to you. It's a nice card system and takes the stabilizers off pretty quick. I have to say, the system really dragged me in and I enjoyed it a lot. That is, up until there is no more game and then it just pushes you into PvP. That's as far as it goes. I played a couple of PvP games and while they're fun, there's no long-term reward for doing so beyond random card drops. Of course, the game expertly tiers you with players in a similar points bracket and the likes, but I was hoping for more challenges, story and mechanics outside of PvP. It's a neat little game though and works a charm on your phone.
is open.
21.
Warhammer Quest 1 and 2 are basically the same game. 2 removes several gripes I had with the first, such as faster movement cycle, but then Quest 2 still takes ages to do anything. It's nice that they have used the system so rigidly, but that experience of random encounters from the tabletop just can't be replicated in the same way. Quest 1 and 2 are good adaptations, but still fall below the bar of experiencing the game in real life.
20.
Brothers, we are chosen to assist Calistaris.
Another direct translation from the board game, well done. Seriously, if you're a fan of the board game, but you have an issue finding an opponent, this is the answer. Treat it like solo play if you like. Although it's well done, I personally found the game repetitive and tedious, but I find that with the board game too, so I'm blaming the source here. It's a puzzle game really, and for that, it works pretty well.
The Space Hulk identified as the Ra.
19.
Space Wolf is a game that is almost brilliant, but due to several very apparent design choices, it falls rather flat. When starting out, the game really shines with endless possibilities, but when you get into it, it turns into a repetitive slog with little narrative. Space Wolf should have been one of the top game contenders, and the reason it got this high is due to some of the very solid gameplay choices that are implemented.
Number 18.
Warhammer as it should be. Well, not really, but Shadows of the Horned Rat is an outstanding achievement for its age in terms of what it tried to do and how well it delivered. Honestly, the mercenary system in the old world is superb. Storytelling is simple but incredibly effective. Tons of enemies and several pitch battles with interesting goals to them. It's just a shame that the actual combat system is so tedious, or this may have been a timeless game.
Number 17.
Dawn of War 2 departs from the standard base building that real-time nerds came to love and loathe. Introducing far more RPG elements, quests, experience, and heavy on item collection, Dawn of War 2 is miles away from its predecessor. In a good way, that is, as it made its own fan base and without simply updating the first game. This welcome change was celebrated by fans of the series, and looking at it now you can see it inspired players to get into Dota or League of Legends.
Number 16.
Deathwing was inevitable. Having a Left 4 Dead first-person shooter live the life of a Terminator as they become a salvage crew had to happen. Deathwing is a superb co-op experience, much more so than a solo game. Although pretty repetitive, there are a lot of reasons to love Deathwing, namely the tension and atmosphere which oozes the grim dark future.
Number 15.
We really like Drop Assault. There are a number of these sort of mobile games cropping up currently and it's not hard to see why. Very much in the spirit of a free-to-play model, Drop Assault just keeps getting bigger and better the longer you keep going. That's one of the issues too, mind. It doesn't want you to play anything else, and honestly, the gameplay is quite automatic.
Open
fire!
Dark Omen is without a doubt one of the best games of the 90s. Following on from Shadow the Horned Rat, it was a much better game, but honestly, it didn't actually fix that major issue it had with the combat. It improved all elements, but there are still underlying issues that you just need to learn to work around to make it a workable gaming experience.
Charge!
Number 30.
Vermintide had us really excited about it when it was announced. Everything about it was superb, except perhaps basing it on a first-person shooter engine designed with shooting physics. It baffles me why this isn't a 40k title. Well, except it would have been too closely compared with other 40k shooters, I guess. But there's just something in Vermintide that gives you all the weapons a weightlessness that should have been addressed. It's a good quick game, but maybe they would have been better looking into a system that dealt more with hand-to-hand than shooting.
Number 12.
Battlefleet Gothic Armada is one of those games that really didn't deserve to be this awesome, but it really is. Heavily influenced by the tabletop rules and sleekly implemented a real-time system that works, this is a game that many space combat enthusiasts have longed for. Honestly, it would have been so easy to do a watered-down version of this and still have a positive outcome, but the developers showed creativity to the lore and expanded universe.
Number 11.
Shall fall before us.
Chess with orcs.
Regicide should be nothing more than battle chess. I guess it is glorified battle chess in the heart of it, but what creativity for such an old and dull, in my opinion, game as chess. Adding in a combat phase to chess doesn't make sense, but somehow Regicide puts the fun back into the game, adding random damage and over-the-top hilarious animations. The nice spin on an otherwise outdated game. DEATHWATCH is probably a surprise entry this high, but it deserves recognition for having great level design, an interesting card upgrade mechanic, and of course a good tried and tested combat system. If you like, this is the game that Space Crusade wishes it was. As an enemy faction, Tyranids work quite well because their AI doesn't require much thought beyond edging closer to their foe every turn. But that's not to say that the game is easy. It lands several tricky areas in the most unexpected places, making it a tense turn-based tactics game.
Number 9.
What if Civilization was made into a 40k game? Well now, that question has simply been answered in the form of GLADIUS. This 4X or XXXX game is sure to impress all flavours of strategy fans. 4 factions with unique strengths and weaknesses, GLADIUS is a finely balanced game with a lot of replayability.
Number 8.
The winner of the 1990s goes to Chaos Gate. Chaos Gate is almost still a superb game today, if not for its very random and punishing nature. Simple to pick up, and yet so complex with options. It's the grounds for an XCOM style system.
Number 7.
Soon the Imperium of Man.
All the action in a full frontal assault defending your Titan homeworld from the invading orcs. This is Space Marine in its fullest. Honestly, nothing is left to your imagination here. The brutality of war, the camaraderie, and the heroism all shine through. The graphics and sound do their part in strength to telling a very defined and coherent story with some great twists and turns along the way. Space Marine is really well deserved.
Number 6.
I think everyone wanted to see Command & Conquer, but with Space Marines, and that's precisely what we got. Not only that, but it works too. It works perfectly. Dawn of War is so good that all the races have been added in over time, and it's a work of art how balanced it is. So much so that it made the sequels difficult to match up to it.
Number 5.
This may look like an April's Fool being this high, but Squad Command uses a system that should be utilised more. It's got a cover and line of sight system that should easily be the norm nowadays, yet it's not used in anything. Squad Command boasts fully destructive terrain with its very destructive teams. I'm willing to bet that having it as a PSP only game was one of its biggest drawbacks and the reason why it was rarely played.
And facial hair. To sum up, slow
A
and
direct translation of the board game, and a damn good one at that. Sure, Blood Bowl has some irritants, such as those bloody dice always rolling skulls, even after a reroll. Welcome to Blood Bowl, the game that you are sure is against you. Blood Bowl 2 doesn't do anything especially new from the first, but cleans up some UI issues as well as generally updates the whole game. Blood Bowl is an inspiring game, how cleanly it does tournament play and matchups.
Number 3.
I'm sure there are more vehicles and infantry types in Armageddon than in any other game out there. This is like a catalogue for how vast the 40k lore is, and it only explores the ground combat area. It's mind-boggling how many choices you have every time you go to buy a new unit. Level design is superb, costing is really well balanced, and the turn-based strategy elements are spot on, if not a bit dated. Although not for everyone due to being perhaps oversimplified, Armageddon is a very well-rounded and challenging strategy game for any guys out there that love the 40k guns.
Number 2.
Devastating weapon. Greenskin.
I have to admit, Sanctus Reach is a surprise number here. It's a beautiful and intuitive game, and apparently now it's complete, which is a real shame as the Eldar would have been a welcome addition. Focusing on the Space Wolves perhaps a little too much, it's fascinating how Sanctus Reach creates a pretty unique leveling up experience that actually works really nicely. The campaign play with the Imperials may be the highlight of the series. The morale system is easy to understand and manipulate. The best experience, play it versus a friend with large forces. This is the epic Space Marine game we've all been waiting for.
To your pack leaders and to the Wolf Guard.
Number 1.
Of course, Total War had to do it. I guess it shouldn't have been much of a surprise, since it was one of Creative Assembly's biggest games ever, and even they admit that this is their favourite Total War game. A company that big building a game that they absolutely love and have every respect for gleams from every angle. We are spoilt living in a time when we can play out the end times, as in Total War 2, which just adds the remaining races as well as very different worldly objectives, which is most welcome, as it stops that very boring endgame where you just go and crush everything with your invincible army. Both Warhammer Total War games are classic and will go down in the history books as some of the finest developed this century. Well, there you have it. 51 games played and reviewed. It wasn't always easy, and honestly, looking back, there's quite a lot of very decent games out there. Perhaps too many mediocre ones, and as much as there are some superb desktop games coming out, there's also a lot of worrying mobile titles. Thanks for watching, and please let us know what we did right and wrong. See ya.